The acrid smoke stung Zara Blackwood's lungs as she huddled deeper into the darkest corner of her father's smokehouse, the rough-hewn wooden walls pressing against her trembling back. Her right eye was swollen nearly shut, and the metallic taste of blood lingered on her split lip, evidence of her father's latest drunken rage. Outside, the Montana summer of 1878 blazed hot and unforgiving, but inside this haven of curing meats and old ash, Zara felt a chill that went bone deep. She heard the heavy footfalls before she saw the door crack open, letting in a sliver of blinding daylight. Zara pressed herself further into the shadows, stifling a whimper. If her father found her here, the beating would be worse than before. The previous night's whiskey had fueled his fury when she dropped his supper plate, and she wasn't sure she could survive another round of his discipline. "Miss, you in here?" The voice wasn't her father's slurred drawl, but a deep baritone she didn't recognize. Zara remained silent, frozen like a cornered rabbit. "I ain't gonna hurt you," the voice continued, gentler now. "Your neighbor lady, Mrs. Thatcher, she sent me to check. Said she heard the commotion last night." The door opened wider, and Zara caught sight of a tall silhouette framed against the blinding daylight, broad-shouldered and topped with a wide-brimmed hat. She shrunk back farther. "I can see you there in the corner, miss," he said, not advancing. "My name's Flynn Reeves. I work cattle for the Double Cross Ranch." Mrs. Thatcher's mighty worried. "My father will be back soon," Zara whispered, her voice raw from crying. "Please go." The man named Flynn stepped inside, closing the door just enough to dim the light while still keeping it open. As her eyes adjusted, Zara could make out his features' sun-bronzed skin, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes that reminded her of the clear Montana sky. "Your face," he said, his expression hardening as he took in her injuries. "Your father did that?" Zara turned away, shame washing over her. 22 years of her life spent in this small homestead, and the last 7 since her mother passed had been increasingly hellish under her father's iron fist and heavy hand. "He'll kill me if he finds someone here," she said. Flynn crouched down, keeping a respectful distance. "He won't touch you again." Those 5 words, spoken with such quiet certainty, cracked something inside Zara's chest. No one had ever stood between her and her father's rage, not since Ma died. "You don't know him," Zara said. "When he drinks, I don't need to know him," Flynn interrupted. "I know what I'm seeing, and I know what's right. No man should raise his hand to a woman, least of all his daughter." The sound of horses approaching made Zara's blood run cold. "That's him," she gasped. "Please, you have to go." Flynn stood, his jaw set in determination. "You stay put. I'll handle this." "No." Zara scrambled to her feet, ignoring the pain shooting through her ribs. "He carries a gun. I ain't afraid of bullies with guns," Flynn said, his hand resting on his own holstered revolver. "Been dealing with them most my life." Before Zara could protest further, Flynn slipped out of the smokehouse. Through a crack in the wooden slats, she watched as her father dismounted from his horse, swaying slightly, already half drunk, though it was barely past noon. "Who the hell are you?" her father demanded, eyeing Flynn suspiciously. "Name's Flynn Reeves." "I'm looking for work," Flynn lied smoothly. "Heard you might need help around your place." Her father spat on the ground. "Heard wrong. Now get off my property." Flynn didn't move. "Actually, I also came with a message from Sheriff Dawson. Seems there's been complaints about disturbances here. Loud noises. Woman screaming." Zara's heart hammered in her chest. There was no message from the sheriff. The law rarely bothered with domestic matters, especially not out here miles from town. Her father's face darkened. "Ain't no business of yours or the sheriff's what happens on my land." "See, that's where you're wrong," Flynn said, his posture relaxed but alert. When a man beats his daughter bloody, it becomes everybody's business. Her father's hand moved toward the gun on his hip. You been talking to my girl? Didn't need to talk to her. Her face told me plenty. What happened next unfolded with frightening speed. Her father drew his pistol, but Flynn was faster, much faster. In one fluid motion, he disarmed the older man, twisting the gun from his grasp and shoving him backward into the dirt. I wouldn't, Flynn said, now holding her father's gun along with his own. Next move you make might be your last, and I'd hate to have to explain to the sheriff why I had to shoot you. Zara couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her father, Victor Blackwood, who had terrorized her for years, was sprawled in the dirt, glaring up with impotent rage at this stranger. Zara, her father bellowed. Get out here, girl. Flynn shook his head. She's not coming out, and you're going to listen real careful to what I'm about to say. Zara watched, transfixed, as Flynn spoke in low tones to her father. She couldn't hear the words, but she could see the effect they had. Her father's face drained of color, then flushed with anger, then settled into a kind of grim acceptance. After what seemed like an eternity, Flynn stepped back, keeping the guns trained on her father. Now get on your horse and ride to town. Sheriff will be expecting you. This is my property, her father snarled. And she's your daughter, not your punching bag, Flynn replied evenly. Choice is simple. Ride to town and face the law, or try me here and now. Either way, your days of hurting her are over. For a moment, Zara thought her father would choose the latter. Instead, with a string of curses, he climbed back onto his horse and spurred it toward town, throwing one last venomous look over his shoulder. Only when the dust from her father's departure had settled did Flynn return to the smokehouse. He holstered his own gun and tucked her father's into his belt. Miss, it's safe to come out now. Zara emerged slowly, squinting in the bright sunlight. What did you say to him? Flynn's expression was grim. Told him I knew about the other things, two things Mrs. Thatcher suspected. Told him if he ever came near you again, he'd answer to me before he answered to the law. And that might be the kinder option. Zara wrapped her arms around herself. He'll be back. When he's drunk enough, he'll come back and He won't, Flynn said with certainty. But even if he tried, you won't be here. Zara looked up at him, confusion mingling with the first fragile tendrils of hope. What do you mean? Mrs. Thatcher's offered to take you in, at least for now. She's been worried about you for months. Just didn't know how to help. When she saw me riding past this morning, she flagged me down, told me what she suspected. Tears welled in Zara's eyes. I can't just leave. This is my home. The livestock, the garden. Mrs. Thatcher says she's got a cousin in Helena who needs help at her dress shop. Could be a fresh start for you. Flynn's expression softened. Nobody deserves to live in fear, Miss Blackwood. Zara, she corrected automatically. My name is Zara. Flynn nodded, the hint of a smile touching his lips. Zara, then. Let's get you to Mrs. Thatcher's. You can decide what comes next when you're safe. As Flynn helped gather what few belongings she wanted to take, Zara felt as though she were moving through a dream. 7 years of fear and pain, and in the span of an hour, this stranger had upended everything. Why? She asked as Flynn loaded her small bundle onto his horse. Why would you help someone you don't even know? Flynn was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. My sister, he finally said. Her husband was like your father. By the time I found out, it was too late. He looked at Zara, his blue eyes intense. Never again. Not if I can help it. Zara nodded, understanding blooming in her chest. As Flynn helped her onto his horse, his hands strong but gentle, she allowed herself to believe just for a moment that maybe her life wasn't ending today, but beginning. The ride to Mrs. Thatcher's homestead took less than 20 minutes, but to Zara, it felt like crossing from one world into another. Seated in front of Flynn on his sturdy bay gelding, she was acutely aware of his solid presence behind her, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the careful way he held the reins to avoid jostling her injuries. Mrs. Thatcher, a plump widow in her 50s with silver-streaked hair, rushed out to meet them as they approached her neat whitewashed cabin. The concern on her kindly face made Zara's throat tighten with emotion. "Oh, my dear girl," Mrs. Thatcher exclaimed, helping Zara down from the horse. "I should have done something sooner. I'm so sorry." "You're doing something now," Flynn said, dismounting with fluid grace. "That's what matters." Inside the cabin, Mrs. Thatcher fussed over Zara's injuries, applying cool compresses to her swollen eye and dabbing salve on her split lip. The gentle ministrations, so unlike anything Zara had experienced since her mother's death, brought fresh tears to her eyes. "I can't stay here," Zara said once Mrs. Thatcher had finished. "Pa will come looking for me. He'll cause trouble for you." "Let him try," Mrs. Thatcher said with surprising steel in her voice. "My late husband left me with more than just this homestead. I can handle a bully like Victor Blackwood." Flynn, who had been standing near the door, spoke up. "I'll be staying around for a few days just to make sure. Boss at the Double Cross gave me some time when I explained the situation." Zara looked up at him, surprised. "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't," Flynn replied simply. That evening, after a proper meal that Zara could barely remember the like of, Mrs. Thatcher showed her to a small but comfortable bedroom. The clean sheets and soft pillow felt like unimaginable luxury after years of sleeping on a thin pallet in the corner of her father's cabin. "Flynn will be in the barn," Mrs. Thatcher told her. "Should your father or anyone else come calling with ill intentions." Later, as twilight deepened into night, Zara found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. The events of the day kept replaying in her mind, and underneath the fear and uncertainty was something else, a whisper of possibility she hardly dared acknowledge. She slipped out of bed and went to the window, gazing out at the barn where she knew Flynn was keeping watch. A lantern glowed faintly through one of the windows. On impulse, Zara pulled a shawl around her shoulders and quietly left the house. The night air was cool against her skin as she crossed the yard to the barn. She hesitated at the door, suddenly uncertain. "Come on in," Flynn's voice called from inside. "I heard your footsteps." Zara pushed open the door to find Flynn seated on a hay bale, a book open in his hands. The lantern cast warm light across his features, softening them. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, closing the book. Zara shook her head. "Too much happened today. My mind won't quiet." Flynn nodded in understanding. "Sit if you'd like," he said, gesturing to another hay bale across from him. Zara sat, arranging her shawl around her shoulders. "What are you reading?" Flynn held up the book. "Tennyson, poetry." Zara's eyebrows rose in surprise. Cowboy's reading poetry wasn't something she'd encountered before. Flynn smiled at her expression. "My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father. She made sure all her children had an education and an appreciation for literature." "Would you read some?" Zara asked, then immediately felt foolish for the request. But Flynn didn't laugh. Instead, he opened the book again and began to read, his deep voice giving weight and meaning to the words in a way that made Zara's heart beat faster. She closed her eyes, letting the poetry wash over her like cool water. When he finished the poem, silence settled between them, comfortable rather than awkward. "Thank you," Zara said softly, "for everything, not just the reading." Flynn looked at her for a long moment. "You don't need to thank me for treating you like a human being deserving of dignity and safety, Zara. That should be the bare minimum." Something in his words, in the way he said her name, made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years, maybe ever. "What will happen now?" she asked. "That depends on what you want," Flynn replied. Mrs. Thatcher meant what she said about her cousin in Helena. Or there might be other options. "What about my father?" Flynn's expression darkened slightly. "I spoke with the sheriff before I came to Mrs. Thatcher's. He's holding your father for now, but the law's complicated when it comes to family matters." He leaned forward. "But I meant what I said to him. He won't hurt you again, not while I draw breath." The conviction in his voice should have frightened her. It spoke of violence, of retribution. Instead, it made her feel protected in a world that had offered her precious little protection. "I should let you rest," Zara said, standing. Flynn rose as well. "Will you be all right getting back to the house?" Zara nodded. "Yes, I thank you for the poetry." As she turned to leave, Flynn spoke again. "Zara, whatever you decide to do next, you won't be facing it alone. I promise you that." Those words followed her back to the house, wrapping around her like a blanket as she finally drifted off to sleep. The next 3 days passed in a blur of small revelations for Zara. The simple joy of moving without fear. The luxury of eating when hungry, rather than when permitted. The novel experience of speaking her mind without bracing for a blow. Mrs. Thatcher proved to be not just kind but wickedly funny, with a sharp wit that made Zara laugh more than she had in years. She showed Zara her herb garden and taught her to make remedies for various ailments, including a salve that helped reduce the swelling around her eye. Flynn came and went, riding into town each day to check on the situation with her father and returning with news and supplies. On the 3rd day, he brought a letter from Mrs. Thatcher's cousin in Helena, confirming that yes, she would be delighted to have Zara's help in the dress shop, and yes, there was a small room above the shop where Zara could stay. "You could leave as soon as next week," Mrs. Thatcher said as they sat around the dinner table that evening. "The stage comes through on Tuesday." Zara looked down at her plate, emotions warring within her. The prospect of Helena, a real city, with shops and theaters and people who didn't know her as Victor Blackwood's pitiful daughter, was both thrilling and terrifying. "I've never been farther than 10 miles from home," she admitted. "It's a fine city," Flynn said. "I spent some time there a few years back. Good people for the most part." "Would you?" Zara began, then stopped herself, cheeks flushing. "Would I what?" Flynn prompted gently. "Would you be willing to escort me there?" Zara asked in a rush. "I'd pay you, of course, from my earnings once I start work." Flynn's eyes softened. "I'd be honored to see you safely to Helena, Zara, and there's no need for payment." Mrs. Thatcher beamed at them both. "Well, that's settled then. Now, who wants apple pie?" Later that night, Zara found Flynn on the porch, smoking a cigarette and gazing up at the stars. She joined him at the railing, keeping a respectable distance. "Any news of my father?" she asked. Flynn exhaled a stream of smoke. "Sheriff released him this afternoon." Zara tensed. "He'll come here. He's been warned what will happen if he does." Flynn looked at her. "But if you're worried, we could leave sooner. I could take you to Helena tomorrow." Zara considered this. Part of her wanted to flee immediately, but another part, a part that was growing stronger each day, was tired of running, tired of fear dictating her choices. "No," she decided. "I won't let him chase me off in the night like a scared rabbit. Tuesday is fine." Flynn smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and made something flutter in Zara's chest. "You're a brave woman, Zara Blackwood." She laughed softly. "I don't feel brave. Most days I feel like I'm still that little girl hiding in the smokehouse." "Courage isn't about not being afraid," Flynn said. "It's about being afraid and doing what needs doing anyway." They stood in companionable silence for a while, looking up at the vast Montana sky scattered with stars. "Tell me about the Double Cross Ranch," Zara said eventually. What's it like working there? Flynn leaned against the porch post. It's good work, if hard. The owner, Mr. Hollister, is fair. Pays on time. Doesn't tolerate unnecessary roughness with the cattle or the men. He smiled slightly. Been working there 3 years now. Saved up enough that I'm thinking of staking my own claim soon. Your own ranch? Zara asked, interested. Flynn nodded. Small one to start. There's good land opening up north of here. He glanced at her. What about you? Did you ever think about what you'd do if you could leave? Zara wrapped her arms around herself. After Ma died, I stopped thinking much beyond surviving each day. But I used to dream of teaching. Ma taught me to read and write and do figures. I always thought I'd like to do that for others. You still could, Flynn said. Helena has schools. Maybe after you've worked at the dress shop for a while. The idea took root in Zara's mind, a fragile shoot of hope. Maybe, she agreed. The sound of approaching horses cut through the quiet night. Flynn straightened, his hand moving to his gun. Get inside, he said, his voice low and urgent. Wake Mrs. Thatcher and tell her to get her shotgun ready, just in case. Zara hesitated. Is it now, Zara? Flynn said, his tone brooking no argument. She hurried inside, heart pounding. Mrs. Thatcher was already awake, standing in the hallway with a shawl thrown over her nightgown. I heard, the older woman said grimly. The shotgun's in my bedroom. I'll get it. Zara peeked through the front window. 3 riders had pulled up in the yard. By the light of the moon, she could make out her father's bulky silhouette on the lead horse. The other 2 men she recognized as Lester Simmons and Wade Tucker, drinking companions of her father's from town. Flynn stood on the porch, relaxed but alert, as the 3 men dismounted. Evening, gentlemen, Flynn called. You're out late. I've come for my daughter, Victor Blackwood slurred, clearly drunk. She's my property, and I'm taking her home. She's not property, Flynn replied evenly. She's a grown woman who's made her choice. I suggest you respect it and ride on. Lester Simmons spat a stream of tobacco juice. Ain't your business, cowboy. Man's got a right to discipline his household. She ain't a part of his household anymore, Flynn said. Now I'm asking you nice just once. Turn around and leave. Victor lurched forward. I ain't leaving without her. Mrs. Thatcher appeared beside Zara, shotgun in hand. I'm going out there, she whispered. No. Zara grabbed her arm. Please, they're dangerous when they're drinking. So am I, Mrs. Thatcher said grimly, but she stayed put. Outside, the confrontation was escalating. Victor had pulled his gun, a different one than Flynn had taken previously, and was waving it unsteadily. Last chance, cowboy. Send her out, or I'm coming in to get her. Flynn hadn't drawn his weapon. Mr. Blackwood, you're drunk and you're not thinking clearly. Put the gun down before someone gets hurt. Victor's response was to fire a wild shot that splintered the porch railing next to Flynn. In one fluid motion, Flynn drew his revolver and fired. Victor howled, dropping his gun and clutching his shoulder. That's a flesh wound, Flynn said coldly. Next one won't be. Take your friends and go. Lester and Wade looked at each other, then at Victor bleeding in the dirt. Neither made a move to draw their weapons. Come on, Vic, Lester finally said. This ain't worth dying over. She's my daughter, Victor snarled, but he allowed his friends to help him onto his horse. Not anymore, Flynn replied. She's her own woman now. You come near her again, I won't aim for your shoulder. The 3 men rode off, Victor's curses fading into the night. Only when they were well out of sight did Flynn holster his gun and come inside. Are you all right? Zara asked, rushing to meet him. Flynn nodded, though his face was grim. I'm fine. But we should leave tomorrow, not Tuesday. Your father's pride is hurt worse than his shoulder. Men like that get dangerous when they're humiliated. Mrs. Thatcher agreed. I'll pack provisions tonight. You can take my wagon, it'll be more comfortable for Zara than riding horseback all the way to Helena. That night, Zara barely slept, her mind racing with thoughts of the journey ahead and of Flynn. She'd known him less than a week, yet he'd risked his life for her twice now. No one had ever stood up for her like that, not even when her mother was alive. More than that, he treated her like she mattered, like her thoughts and feelings were important, like she was a person worthy of respect, not just a convenient target for rage. It was a dangerous feeling, this growing warmth whenever he was near. Dangerous because she was leaving, starting a new life in Helena. Dangerous because a man like Flynn Reeves, handsome, kind, brave, surely had his pick of women without her scars and baggage. Dawn found her still awake, watching the first pale light filter through her window. A soft knock on her door startled her. Zara? Mrs. Thatcher called softly. Are you awake, dear? We should get ready to leave. The day passed in a flurry of activity. Mrs. Thatcher packed food for their journey, while Flynn readied the wagon and his horse. By mid-morning, they were ready to depart. I can never repay you for your kindness, Zara told Mrs. Thatcher as they embraced. The older woman patted her cheek gently. Live a good life, my dear. That's repayment enough. Flynn helped Zara up onto the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her. With a final wave to Mrs. Thatcher, they set off toward Helena, Flynn's horse tied to the back of the wagon. The journey would take 2 days, with an overnight stop at a way station halfway between Mrs. Thatcher's homestead and Helena. As they left the familiar landscape behind, Zara felt both terrified and exhilarated. Having second thoughts? Flynn asked, noticing her expression. Zara shook her head. Not second thoughts, just so many thoughts. I've never been this far from home before. Flynn's hands were steady on the reins. First time I left home, I was 16. Thought I knew everything there was to know. He chuckled. World taught me different right quick. Were you scared? Zara asked. Terrified, Flynn admitted easily, but also excited, like standing at the edge of something vast and unknown. Yes, Zara said softly. That's exactly how it feels. They traveled through the morning, the rhythmic clop of the horses' hooves and the creak of the wagon wheels creating a soothing backdrop to their conversation. Flynn told her stories of his time as a cowboy, cattle drives in thunderstorms, encounters with wild animals, the camaraderie around campfires at night. In turn, Zara shared memories of her mother, a gentlewoman who'd taught her to read from the family Bible, who'd shown her how to coax stubborn seeds into flourishing garden plants, who'd sung her to sleep with soft lullabies even when her father raged. She sounds like a remarkable woman, Flynn said when Zara fell silent. You have her strength, I think. Zara looked at him in surprise. I'm not strong. If I were, I would have left years ago. Flynn shook his head. Surviving is strength, Zara. You endured years of hell and kept your kindness, your intelligence, your dignity. That's not weakness. His words touched something deep inside her, a part that had been wounded by years of her father's contempt. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat some of Mrs. Thatcher's provisions. The summer sun was hot overhead, but a pleasant breeze made it bearable. How much farther to the way station? Zara asked as they prepared to continue their journey. Another 4 hours or so, Flynn replied, checking the horses' harnesses. We'll get there before dark. As they traveled on, the landscape began to change subtly. The open grasslands gave way to more wooded areas, with stands of pines and aspens breaking up the horizon. Late afternoon brought the first sight of mountains in the distance, their peaks purple against the sky. It's beautiful, Zara breathed. Flynn smiled. Wait till you see the view as we get closer to Helena. There's a spot where the whole valley opens up before you. First time I saw it, I had to stop and just look for a while. The way station, when they reached it, proved to be a sturdy log building with a stable for horses and separate sleeping quarters for men and women. The proprietor, a grizzled older man named Hank, greeted them with gruff hospitality. "Supper's in an hour," he told them after Flynn had paid for their lodging. "Nothing fancy, but it's hot and there's plenty." Flynn insisted on checking the women's quarters before allowing Zara to settle in. "Looks clean enough," he said, emerging from the small room. "Lock the door tonight, though. These places can attract all sorts." Supper was indeed plain but plentiful: beef stew, cornbread, and coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. Zara and Flynn ate at a corner table, away from the handful of other travelers passing through. "After Helena," Zara asked hesitantly, "where will you go?" Flynn took a sip of his coffee. "Back to the Double Cross, I suppose. At least until I've saved enough for that land I mentioned." Zara nodded, trying to ignore the hollowness that opened up inside her at the thought of him riding away once they reached Helena. "Would you write to me?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "I'd like to know how your plans for your ranch progress." Flynn's eyes met hers, something warm in their blue depths. "I'd be honored to correspond with you, Zara. And perhaps, if you're amenable, I might visit Helena from time to time, to see how you're settling in." The hollow feeling receded, replaced by a fluttering warmth. "I'd like that very much." After supper, they sat on the way station's porch, watching the sun set behind the distant mountains. The air was cooling rapidly, and Zara pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "We should turn in early," Flynn suggested. "Long day tomorrow if we want to reach Helena before dark." Zara nodded, though she was reluctant to end their time together. At the door to the women's quarters, she paused. "Flynn, I thank you for everything." He tipped his hat, a small smile playing at his lips. "Sleep well, Zara. I'll see you at breakfast." Inside her small room, Zara lay on the narrow bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the way station muffled conversations, the occasional burst of laughter, the distant nickering of horses. Sleep seemed impossible with her mind so full of the day's events and the journey still ahead. Yet eventually, lulled by exhaustion and the strange comfort of being so far from her father's reach, she drifted off. The second day of their journey dawned clear and bright. Breakfast at the way station was simple biscuits, gravy, and more of the strong coffee, but Zara ate heartily, her appetite improved by the fresh air and exercise of travel. "Ready?" Flynn asked as they finished their meal. Zara nodded, a mixture of excitement and trepidation churning in her stomach. By nightfall, they would be in Helena, and she would begin her new life. The terrain grew increasingly mountainous as they traveled, the road winding through valleys and along ridgelines. Around midday, Flynn pulled the wagon to a stop at an overlook. "Look," he said, gesturing ahead. Zara gasped. Spread out below them was a vast valley, and nestled within it, the city of Helena. Even from this distance, she could make out buildings, streets, and the glint of what must be the creek that ran through the town. "It's bigger than I imagined," she said, awestruck. Flynn nodded. "About 5,000 people now, I'd reckon. Started as a mining camp, but it's growing into a proper city." They sat for a moment, taking in the view. Zara was struck by the strange feeling that her life was divided into before and after. Before this journey, this moment, this man beside her, and after. "We should keep moving," Flynn said eventually. "Still a few hours to go." As they descended into the valley, the road became busier. They passed other wagons, riders on horseback, and even a stagecoach thundering past in a cloud of dust. Zara watched it all with wide eyes, drinking in the novelty. The outskirts of Helena appeared first scattered buildings giving way to more established neighborhoods as they drew closer to the city center. Zara had never seen so many buildings in one place, never heard the cacophony of a busy town at the end of a working day. Mrs. Thatcher said her cousin's dress shop is on Last Chance Gulch, Flynn said, navigating the wagon through the bustling streets. Main Street through the heart of town. Last Chance Gulch proved to be the center of Helena's commercial district, a wide street lined with businesses of all sorts, from saloons to banks to mercantiles. Flynn guided the wagon to a stop in front of a neat storefront with Madame Pearson's fine apparel, painted in elegant script on the window. "This is it," he said, setting the brake. Zara stared at the shop, suddenly overwhelmed. What if Mrs. Thatcher's cousin didn't like her? What if she couldn't learn the dress-making trade quickly enough? What if Zara, Flynn said gently, breaking into her spiraling thoughts. One step at a time, remember? She took a deep breath and nodded. Flynn jumped down from the wagon and came around to help her descend. As his hands circled her waist, lifting her easily to the ground, Zara was acutely aware of his strength, his nearness. The shop door opened, and a tall, elegant woman in her 40s emerged. She had Mrs. Thatcher's kind eyes, though her face was more angular, her bearing more refined. "You must be Zara," she said, coming forward with her hands extended. "I'm Francine Pearson. My cousin has told me so much about you." Zara took the offered hands, finding them warm and strong. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Pearson. Madame Pearson in the shop, but Francine to you, my dear." Her gaze shifted to Flynn. "And you must be the cowboy who rescued our Zara." Flynn tipped his hat. "Flynn Reeves, madam. Just doing what any decent man would." Francine's expression suggested she disagreed with that assessment but was too polite to say so. "You must both be exhausted. Come inside. I've prepared a simple supper, and I'll show Zara to her room upstairs." The interior of the dress shop was a wonderland to Zara's eyes. Racks of beautiful garments, shelves of fabrics in every color imaginable, and a workshop area in the back with sewing machines and mannequins. "This is magnificent," Zara breathed. Francine beamed. "I'm so glad you think so. I started with just a single sewing machine 15 years ago, after my husband passed. Now I have 3 seamstresses working for me, and we can barely keep up with the orders." She led them through a door at the back of the shop and up a narrow staircase to the living quarters above. The apartment was small but exquisitely furnished, with polished wood floors, tasteful artwork, and windows that looked out over the busy street below. "This is my home," Francine explained. "But I've prepared the spare bedroom for you, Zara. It's small, but I hope you'll be comfortable." The bedroom was indeed small, but to Zara, who had spent her life in a crude cabin with barely any privacy, it was luxurious. A real bed with a proper mattress, a small writing desk by the window, a wardrobe, and even a washstand with a porcelain basin and pitcher. "It's perfect," Zara said, trying not to cry at the kindness being shown to her. "I'll let you freshen up," Francine said. "Supper will be ready in about 30 minutes. When she'd gone, Zara turned to Flynn, who was standing in the doorway. "I can't believe this is happening," she said softly. Flynn's smile was gentle. "You deserve every bit of it, Zara. And more." Over supper, Francine explained how the dress shop operated and what Zara's duties would be. "You'll start as an assistant, learning the basics. Threading needles, cutting patterns, helping customers. As you learn, you'll take on more responsibilities." "I'll work hard," Zara promised. "I want to learn everything." Francine patted her hand. "I know you will, dear. Agnes, that's my cousin, she told me you're a quick study. And we'll make sure you have time to explore Helena, too. It's a wonderful city, full of opportunities." After the meal, Flynn stood to leave. "I should find lodgings for the night," he said. "There's a decent boarding house a few streets over." Nonsense, Francine said firmly. You'll stay here. The sofa in my sitting room is quite comfortable, and I won't hear of you spending money on a room elsewhere after all you've done. Flynn looked like he might protest, but then relented with a grateful nod. That's very kind of you, madam. Later, as Zara prepared for bed in her new room, there was a soft knock at her door. She opened it to find Flynn standing there, hat in hand. I wanted to say good night, he said. And to tell you that I'm proud of you, Zara. Takes courage to start over like this. Zara's heart swelled. When will you leave for the double cross? Day after tomorrow, I think. Thought I might stay an extra day. Make sure you're settling in all right. Zara nodded, trying to hide her disappointment that he would be leaving so soon. I'd like that. Flynn hesitated, then reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather light. Good night, Zara. Sleep well. Good night, Flynn, she whispered, watching as he turned and walked back to the sitting room. That night, in her new bed, in her new room, in her new life, Zara dreamed of wide-open skies and a pair of blue eyes that made her feel like she was finally, truly seen. The next day was a whirlwind of new experiences. Francine introduced Zara to the other seamstresses, Beatrice, a motherly woman in her 50s, and the twins Lillian and Louise, who were barely older than Zara herself. All three welcomed her warmly, though Zara caught them exchanging glances when they saw the fading bruises on her face. Flynn spent the morning stabling Mrs. Thatcher's wagon and horse at a livery that would return them on the next supply run to her area. When he returned to the dress shop, Francine insisted on outfitting him with a new shirt on the house, as a small token of our gratitude. In the afternoon, Flynn took Zara on a tour of Helena, showing her the main streets, the courthouse, the churches, and the small park at the center of town. They walked side by side, not touching but close enough that Zara could feel the warmth of him beside her. It's so alive, Zara marveled as they watched the bustle of Last Chance Gulch. So many people, all with their own lives and stories. Flynn nodded. That's what I love about towns. All these lives intersecting, creating something larger than any one person. They stopped at a small cafe for coffee and pie, sitting at a table by the window where they could watch the street life. Zara was painfully aware that their time together was growing short by this time tomorrow. Flynn would be on his way back to the Double Cross Ranch. Flynn, she began hesitantly. I've been thinking about what you said about writing to each other. I meant it, he said. I'd like to know how you're getting on here, and maybe when I've saved enough for that piece of land. He trailed off, but Zara's heart quickened at the implication. Where is this land you're hoping to buy? North of here, near the Missouri River. Good grazing land with a creek running through it. Small cabin already built. His eyes took on a distant look. It needs work, but I can see what it could be, with time and effort. It sounds wonderful, Zara said softly. Flynn's gaze returned to her, intent now. Zara, I know we've only known each other a short time, and I don't want to presume, but I find myself thinking about you more than is probably proper. Zara's cheeks flushed. I think about you too, she admitted. Flynn reached across the table, his hand covering hers. I'm not asking for anything now. You need time to find your footing here, to discover who you are without your father's shadow hanging over you. But maybe someday if you found yourself still thinking of me. I will, Zara said with certainty. Be thinking of you, I mean. Flynn's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Then I'll write and I'll visit when I can, and we'll see where life takes us. Is that agreeable to you? Zara turned her hand under his so their palms met, fingers intertwining. Very agreeable. That evening, they had supper with Francine again, the conversation flowing easily between them. Francine, Zara was discovering, had a wealth of stories from her years running the dress shop, tales of demanding brides, eccentric matrons, and the changing fashions of Helena society. As they prepared to retire for the night, Francine announced that she would be opening the shop later than usual the next morning. "So you two can have a proper goodbye," she said with a knowing smile that made Zara blush. In her room, Zara couldn't sleep. The thought of Flynn leaving tomorrow filled her with a hollow ache. She knew it was irrational. They'd known each other less than a week, and he'd promised to write, to visit. Yet the prospect of daily life without his steady presence seemed suddenly bleak. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and went to the small window that overlooked the alley behind the shop. The night was clear, stars visible even through the ambient light of the town. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear the door open behind her. "Zara?" Flynn's voice was a whisper in the darkness. She turned, startled. "Flynn? Is something wrong?" He stepped into the room, closing the door softly behind him. In the dim light from the window, she could see he was still fully dressed, as if he too had been unable to sleep. "I couldn't rest," he said, staying near the door. "Kept thinking about leaving tomorrow." Zara moved closer to him. "I've been thinking about that too." Flynn reached out, his fingers lightly tracing the curve of her cheek. "I've never met anyone like you, Zara Blackwood. Your strength, your kindness, after everything you've endured. It humbles me." Zara leaned into his touch. "You saw me when I was invisible, Flynn. You gave me back my life." His hand moved to cup her face, thumb brushing gently over her lips. "May I kiss you, Zara?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. In answer, Zara rose on tiptoe, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but quickly deepened as Flynn's arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him. Zara had never been kissed before, had never known that such a simple act could set her whole body alight. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Flynn rested his forehead against hers. "I should go," he whispered. "This isn't proper." "Stay," Zara said. "Just to talk. I'm not ready to say goodbye yet." Flynn hesitated, then nodded. They sat side by side on the edge of her bed, talking in low voices about everything and nothing, his childhood on a small farm in Kansas, her dreams of someday teaching, the books they'd both read and loved. As the night deepened toward dawn, Zara found herself fighting to keep her eyes open, her head drooping against Flynn's shoulder. "Sleep now," he said softly, helping her lie down and pulling the quilt over her. "I'll be here when you wake." True to his word, when Zara opened her eyes to morning sunlight streaming through her window, Flynn was there, seated in the chair by her desk, watching over her with a tender expression. "Good morning," he said. Zara sat up, suddenly self-conscious about her rumpled appearance. "You stayed all night." Flynn nodded. "Just watching you sleep. You looked so peaceful." Before Zara could respond, there was a knock at the door. "Zara? Breakfast is ready when you are," Francine called. "Mr. Reeves too, if you happen to see him." Flynn's eyes crinkled with amusement. "I believe your employer may have guessed where I spent the night." Zara covered her face, mortified. "What must she think of me? That you're a young woman who's found a friend she trusts," Flynn said gently. "Nothing improper happened, Zara. We talked, you fell asleep, I kept watch. That's all." At breakfast, Francine indeed gave them knowing looks but made no comment beyond asking what time Flynn planned to depart. "Mid-morning, I think," he replied. "Want to get a good start before the day gets too hot." All too soon it was time. Flynn's horse was saddled and waiting outside the dress shop, saddlebags packed with provisions Francine had insisted on providing. Zara stood on the sidewalk, trying to memorize every detail of Flynn's face, the way the morning light caught in his hair, the exact shade of blue in his eyes. "I'll write as soon as I reach the double cross," Flynn promised. taking her hands in his. "And I'll visit next month, if that's all right." "I'll be counting the days," Zara said, not caring if it sounded overeager. Flynn leaned down, kissing her softly. "This isn't goodbye, Zara. It's just until next time." And then he was mounting his horse, tipping his hat to her and Francine, and riding away down Last Chance Gulch. Zara watched until he was out of sight, her heart both heavy and inexplicably light. "Well," Francine said, putting an arm around Zara's shoulders, "I'd say Agnes neglected to mention a few details about your cowboy rescuer." Zara blushed. "He's not my cowboy." Francine's smile was knowing. "Not yet, perhaps. But I recognize that look, my dear. I wore it myself once, a lifetime ago." She squeezed Zara's shoulder. "Now, shall we open the shop?" Nothing cures a melancholy heart like good honest work. The weeks that followed were a blur of new experiences for Zara. Learning the dressmaking trade proved both challenging and rewarding. Her fingers, used to rougher work on her father's homestead, gradually became more dexterous with the delicate tasks of sewing and embroidery. Francine was a patient teacher, and the other seamstresses generous with their knowledge. To Zara's surprise, she discovered she had a natural eye for color and design that Francine was quick to encourage. "You have a gift," Francine told her one evening as they reviewed the day's work. "With time and training, you could be designing your own pieces." But the highlight of each week was Flynn's letters. True to his word, he wrote regularly, sometimes brief notes when he was busy with ranch work, sometimes longer letters detailing his progress toward saving for his own land. Zara read each letter multiple times, treasuring his descriptions of daily life at the Double Cross, his musings on books he was reading, and most of all, his consistent closing line, "Thinking of you always, Flynn." In her replies, Zara shared her own daily experiences, her triumphs and failures at the dress shop, her explorations of Helena, and the gradual healing of her spirit in this new environment. With each letter, she found herself able to express more of her thoughts and feelings, as if the distance between them created a safe space for openness. True to his promise, Flynn visited Helena a month after leaving her there. The reunion was joyous, with Zara running into his arms the moment he appeared at the dress shop door. They spent 2 precious days together, walking the streets of Helena, sharing meals, and talking long into the night. Before he left, Flynn gave her a small wooden box he'd carved himself. "For your keepsakes," he said. Inside, she found a pressed wildflower, a Montana bluebell. "To remind you of the color of the sky on the day we met," he explained. His next visit came 6 weeks later, and this time he brought news. "I've found the land," he told her excitedly as they sat in the small park at the center of town. "Signed the papers yesterday. 160 acres along Silver Creek, with that cabin I told you about." Zara squeezed his hand. "Flynn, that's wonderful. When will you start working it?" "Spring," he said. "I'll finish out my contract with the Double Cross, then start fresh with the spring calving season." His expression grew serious. "I'd like you to see it, Zara, when you can get away from the shop for a few days." The invitation hung between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. Zara's heart raced at the implications. "I'd like that very much," she said softly. Winter came to Montana with a vengeance that year. Heavy snows made travel difficult, and Flynn's visits became less frequent. His letters, however, continued steadily, each one a lifeline in the long, dark days of December and January. Zara threw herself into her work, learning and growing under Francine's tutelage. By February, she was designing simple dresses on her own, with Francine's guidance. Her first complete design, a spring walking dress in pale green, was purchased by the banker's wife, a notoriously particular customer. "You've found your calling," Francine declared proudly. Yet despite her success at the dress shop, Despite the comfortable life she was building in Helena, Zara found herself increasingly drawn to thoughts of Flynn's land, of the life he was creating there. His descriptions of the cabin, small but sturdy, with a stone fireplace and windows that caught the morning sun, filled her dreams. March brought the first signs of spring and a letter from Flynn that made Zara's heart skip a beat. "The snow is melting on Silver Creek," he wrote. "I've left the Double Cross and moved to my land. The cabin is habitable, if not yet comfortable. I've ordered lumber for expanding it, another bedroom, a larger kitchen. Perhaps, when the roads are clear, you might come see what you think of the plans." Zara read those lines over and over, her fingers tracing the words. Was he asking what she thought he was asking? Francine found her still staring at the letter, lost in thought. "Good news?" she asked gently. Zara looked up, not bothering to hide the emotion on her face. "Flynn has moved to his own land. He wants me to visit, to see the cabin he's building." Francine sat beside her, taking her hand. "And what do you want, my dear?" "I want to go to him," Zara said simply. "I've known it for months now. I love my work here, I love learning from you. But when I think of home, I think of Flynn." Francine smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in it. "I thought as much. You light up when you speak of him, when his letters arrive." She squeezed Zara's hand. "You'll always have a place here, you know, if things don't work out, or if you simply miss the work." Tears welled in Zara's eyes. "You've been so good to me, Francine. I don't know how to thank you." "Live happily," Francine replied. "That's thanks enough." In early April, with the mountain roads finally clear enough for travel, Flynn arrived in Helena with a wagon rather than on horseback. Zara knew, the moment she saw him standing outside the dress shop, that this visit was different. That evening, as they walked along the creek that ran through Helena, Flynn stopped beneath a flowering tree and took both her hands in his. "Zara," he began, his voice steady but tinged with nervousness. "I've spent these months building not just a ranch, but a home, and I've realized it will never truly be home without you in it." He took a deep breath. "I'm asking if you would consider becoming my wife, coming to live with me on Silver Creek, building a life together." Though she had anticipated the question, hearing it spoken aloud made Zara's heart soar. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Flynn, I will marry you." The joy on his face matched her own as he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that spoke of months of restraint. When they finally broke apart, Flynn reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold ring. "It was my mother's," he said, sliding it onto her finger. "She made me promise to give it only to a woman of true courage and kindness." Zara looked down at the ring, then back up at Flynn, her eyes shining with tears. "I love you," she said for the first time. "I have since you found me in that smokehouse and promised my father wouldn't hurt me again." "And I've loved you just as long," Flynn replied. "From the moment I saw you there, hurt but unbowed, I knew you were the strongest person I'd ever meet." They were married a week later in Helena's small Methodist church, with Francine, the seamstresses, and a few of Flynn's friends from the Double Cross in attendance. Zara wore a dress she had designed herself, a simple but elegant creation of ivory silk with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. "You're the most beautiful bride I've ever seen," Flynn whispered as they exchanged vows. After the ceremony, they set out for Silver Creek Ranch. The journey took 2 days, but to Zara, riding beside her husband in the wagon filled with her belongings and wedding gifts, it felt like a triumphant procession toward a future brighter than she had ever dared to imagine. When they finally crested the last hill and Flynn pointed ahead, Zara caught her first glimpse of their home. The cabin stood in a clearing by the creek, smoke rising from its chimney. Beyond it stretched meadows already turning green with spring grass, bordered by stands of pine and aspen. "It's beautiful," Zara breathed. Flynn's arm tightened around her waist. Welcome home, Mrs. Reeves. The cabin was indeed small, but Flynn had worked miracles with it. The main room was warm and inviting, with a stone fireplace, a sturdy table and chairs, and shelves holding Flynn's books. The bedroom, though tiny, had a real bed with a handmade quilt and a window that looked out toward the mountains. The addition will be built by summer's end, Flynn explained, showing her the foundation he'd already laid. A larger kitchen for you, another bedroom for, well, for the future. The implication made Zara blush, but also filled her with a warm anticipation. A family of their own, children raised in love rather than fear. That night, as they lay together in the narrow bed, Flynn's arms around her, Zara felt a peace she had never known before. The journey from that smokehouse to this moment seemed both impossibly long and strangely swift. What are you thinking? Flynn asked, his voice soft in the darkness. About how far I've come, Zara replied. About how, for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of tomorrow. Flynn's lips found hers in the darkness. No more fear, he promised. Only love, from this day forward. Spring gave way to summer, and Zara threw herself into making their cabin a home while Flynn worked on the addition and tended to the small herd of cattle he'd purchased. She planted a garden, learned to cook on the wood-burning stove, and even began designing and sewing curtains and cushions to brighten the rooms. To her surprise, Zara found she loved ranch life. The rhythm of days marked by sunrise and sunset, the satisfaction of hard work done well, the beauty of the land in all its moods, all of it filled her with contentment she had never imagined possible. By late summer, the addition to the cabin was complete, doubling their living space. Flynn had insisted on including a small workroom for Zara, with good light and space for her to continue designing and sewing. I don't want you to give up something you love just because you married a rancher, he told her. In that workroom, Zara began creating clothes not just for herself and Flynn, but for neighbors who'd heard of her skill from Francine's customers in Helena. Word spread, and soon she had a small but steady business, with women riding for miles around to commission dresses, shirts, and even wedding gowns. Fall brought news that filled them both with nervous excitement. Zara was expecting a child, due in the spring. Flynn's joy was boundless as he spun her around the cabin, then immediately set her down with concern that he might have jostled her. I'm not made of glass, Zara laughed, but she was touched by his protective instinct. As her body changed with the growing child, Zara sometimes found herself thinking of her father. She had heard, through letters from Mrs. Thatcher, that Victor Blackwood had left the territory after selling his homestead, reportedly heading for California. The knowledge that he was far away eased a fear she hadn't realized she still carried. Do you think? She asked Flynn one evening as they sat by the fire, his hand resting on her rounded belly, that what happened to us as children shapes how we become as parents? Flynn was silent for a moment, considering. I think it can, he finally said. But I also think we choose what to carry forward and what to leave behind. My father was a good man who taught me to work hard and treat others with respect. Your father. He paused, searching for words. Taught me what not to do, Zara finished for him. Flynn nodded. Our child will know only love and patience. That's the choice we're making. Their daughter, Flora Grace Reeves, was born on a perfect spring morning in 1880. Exactly 2 years after Flynn had found Zara hiding in that smokehouse. She had her father's blue eyes and a tuft of dark hair that promised to be as rich and brown as her mother's. As Zara held her daughter for the first time, Flynn beside her with tears in his eyes, she marveled at how completely her life had transformed. From a frightened young woman hiding from her father's rage to a wife, mother, and businesswoman with a future full of promise. She's perfect, Flynn whispered, gently touching their daughter's tiny hand. She is, Zara agreed. And she will never know what it's like to be afraid in her own home. Never, Flynn promised, his voice fervent with conviction. She'll know only that she is cherished, just as her mother is. As Flora grew from infant to toddler to little girl, Silver Creek Ranch flourished as well. Flynn's careful management and hard work paid off as his herd increased and his reputation as a fair businessman spread throughout the territory. By the time Flora was 4, they had hired 2 ranch hands to help with the expanding operation. Zara's sewing business continued to thrive, with women coming from as far as Helena for her designs. She had converted one of the outbuildings into a proper workshop, with 3 sewing machines and space to meet with clients. In the winter of 1885, they welcomed their second child, a son they named Frederick Thomas Reeves. Fred, as they called him, was as sunny and outgoing as his sister was thoughtful and observant. The siblings, despite their differences in temperament, formed a close bond that delighted their parents. Life wasn't without its challenges. Montana winters could be brutal, with blizzards that isolated them for weeks at a time. There were calving seasons when Flynn worked day and night, catching sleep in snatches. Dry summers that threatened the grazing land and required careful management of water resources. But through it all, Zara and Flynn faced each challenge together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. The fear and uncertainty of Zara's early life receded further into memory, replaced by the security of Flynn's unwavering love and the joy of watching their children grow. On the 10th anniversary of their marriage, Flynn surprised Zara with a journey back to Helena to visit Francine, who had remained a dear friend and frequent correspondent. The children, now 8 and 4, were wide-eyed with excitement at their first trip to the city. "It seems smaller than I remember," Zara commented as they walked the familiar streets of Helena, Flora and Fred skipping ahead of them. Flynn smiled, his arm around her waist. "That's because your world has grown so much larger." Francine, now in her 60s but still elegant and sharp-witted, welcomed them with open arms. The dress shop had expanded under her guidance, now occupying 2 storefronts with a staff of 8 seamstresses. "Your designs are still our most requested," Francine told Zara as they toured the shop. "I've kept a portfolio of your patterns, and ladies still ask for the Zara style." The visit was a joyful reunion, but as they prepared to return to Silver Creek, Zara realized she no longer felt pulled between 2 worlds. Helena had been a sanctuary when she needed it most, a place of healing and growth, but Silver Creek was truly home. "Ready to go back?" Flynn asked as they loaded the wagon for the journey. Zara looked at him, this man who had rescued her in more ways than he would ever know, whose love had given her the courage to build a life she had never dared to dream possible. "Yes," she said, taking his hand. "Let's go home." As they drove away from Helena, their children chattering excitedly about the adventures ahead, Zara thought again of that day in the smokehouse. How close she had come to a life unlived, to a future foreclosed by fear. How 5 simple words, "he won't touch you again," had changed everything. She glanced at Flynn, his profile strong against the Montana sky, and felt a rush of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. For the man he was, for the life they had built together, for the love that had transformed her from victim to victor. "What is it?" Flynn asked, noticing her gaze. Zara smiled through her tears. "Just thinking about how far we've come, and how lucky I am that you found me that day." Flynn's hand covered hers, warm and strong. "I'm the lucky one, Zara Reeves. Finding you was the beginning of everything good in my life." As the wagon rolled toward Silver Creek Ranch, toward the home and life they had built together, Zara knew with absolute certainty that the frightened girl in the smokehouse would never have believed this future possible. But the woman she had become, wife, mother, businesswoman, beloved, knew it was not just possible but real. And in that knowledge was a joy beyond measure, a peace beyond understanding, and a love that had indeed cast out all fear.